Welcome, everyone, to Securing Virginia's Future, Funding Land Conservation for a Healthy Commonwealth. I'm Carrie Atwood, Executive Director of Virginia Forever, and it's truly an honor to gather with so many passionate individuals today. Our Virginia Forever members, our esteemed colleagues from the General Assembly, our dedicated local leaders, and businesses who champion conservation. I want to say a special thank you to our sponsors, the Virginia Environmental Endowment, in partnership with the Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Districts, Waste Management, and the Wildlife Foundation of Virginia. We cannot produce these webinars without your support. In Virginia, our landscapes define us. From the Blue Ridge Mountains to the Chesapeake Bay, these natural treasures are just not scenic, they are fundamental to our health, our economy, and our well-being. To help us navigate this critical discussion, we are very privileged to have an exceptional panel of experts. Delegates Bloxham and Willett, DCR Director Matt Wells, Nikki Robner from the Nature Conservancy, Parker Agnolasto from the Capital Region Land Conservancy, Ken Wright from Potomac Conservancy, Alan Rossum from the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, Jenny West from the Wildlife Foundation of Virginia, Emily White from the Virginia Outdoors Foundation, and John Eustace from the New River Land Trust. Today, we're going to delve into the vital mechanisms that fund land conservation, showcase the incredible impact of these efforts, and confront the challenges that lie ahead. Our goal is to inspire collective action to ensure these essential lands thrive for years to come. Thank you all again for joining us, and we have a very packed agenda and an incredible lineup, and we expect this webinar to last over an hour, about 1 hour and 45 minutes. It is going to be recorded, so if you need to hop off at any point, please feel free to do so. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Nikki Robner, Associate State Director of the Nature Conservancy. Nikki, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm going to share my screen and ask Carrie if you would give me a thumbs up if you are seeing the right thing. Okay.
We can see it.
Great, thank you. So this first section of our webinar will focus on the state grant programs that Virginia Forever advocates for. But what I've learned over the years of talking about these programs is that focusing too much on the mechanism to begin with is not that exciting. And so I've learned that what people really want to know about and what excites people about these programs are the projects that are accomplished as a result of these programs. And so that's what we're going to hear about first. We're going to hear about several projects from these members of Virginia Forever's board and representatives of state agencies. And I think you will agree with me that these are really meaningful projects that will benefit generations to come as a result of our foresight in funding these state programs and the land trusts and agencies that do these projects. And then after that, we will talk a little bit about exactly how the programs do work and what kind of funding they are getting and what kind of funding they need. But the bulk of the time we will spend on these projects. And so without ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny West with the Wildlife Foundation of Virginia to talk about some amazing projects that her organization has accomplished.
Great. Thank you very much, Nikki. I appreciate the introduction. Glad to be here. And as I was pulling this presentation together, it occurred to me that I've been receiving funding from the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation for 20 years. Our first acquisition using the VLCF funds was in 2005, and we're wrapping up our most recent acquisition, which will be completed, and the grant will be closed out this year. And it has really been a driving force in our efforts, which are focused on conserving land for public access specifically. So, Nikki, if you want to, you're going to advance the slide. Okay, thank you. So we're going to start at the beginning with the Frey Tract, which was a piece of property, 550 acres in Madison County, that is adjacent to the Rapidan Wildlife Management Area and the Shenandoah National Park. And the Frey brothers, John and Jack Frey, were elderly and wanted to see the property conserved specifically for public outdoor recreation. The DWR, then VDGIF, the game department, was interested in acquiring the property, and they approached the Wildlife Foundation because, as many of you know, in either state agency or land trust, private land conservation organizations, it can take a long time for a state agency to acquire a piece of property. And so we stepped in, and the phrase were prepared to make a gift of the property, but there were a lot of due diligence costs associated with acquiring the property itself, specifically 550 acres in Madison County, the topography, the forestry resources, proved to be a very expensive survey initiative. In addition to all the other due diligence and related expenses that went along with it. So while the Frey brothers did donate the property, and they were able to claim significant state tax credits and federal deductions, we looked to the VLCF to help us get across the finish line by covering our due diligence and acquisition costs, which they did. A couple of things that were, Nikki, you can go ahead and next slide, please.
I'm hitting the down button and it's not going.
Our first technical glitch of the day.
That's right. All right. I'm gonna have to stop sharing and restart. I apologize.
Okay, well, it's just a map of how the Frey tract lies within Shenandoah National Park and the Rapidan. But this was significant because 2005, 2007, and I'm sure up until today, that area of Madison County, that area of Madison County was receiving some extraordinary development pressure as people moved further south from the Northern Virginia area where land was cheaper. So it was I think a win. It was certainly a win for all the partners, the Frey brothers, the foundation, DWR, and also VLCF. The next property that I want to talk about, if you could advance, Nikki, is Short Hills, which is now the Short Hills Wildlife Management Area. And this was a large tract of land, just under 5,000 acres. And it's appraised at a little bit over $10 million. The property owners wanted to have a bargain sale component to this acquisition initiative, and we had some great partners. We had Virginia Outdoors Foundation, who secured $3 million in Virginia Land Conservation Bond funds. We had DWR, who was able to contribute $3 million to match the land conservation bond funds from the Pittman-Robertson funds that the department receives. The Wildlife Foundation got a loan from the Conservation Fund to bridge the timing of DWR's financial commitment to this project. And then we got, again, we had all the money, but we didn't have the resources internally to pay out of pocket for all of our due diligence costs. So we received a VLCF loan in the amount of $239,000. Again, a lot of that was the survey that we had to conduct on the property. And then there was a significant gift component by the sellers, which resulted in match for the VLCF grant specifically, since the PR money and the land conservation bond money matched each other. Short Hills Wildlife Management Area, we turned it over to Short Hills Department of Wildlife Resources about 2 years after the acquisition was complete. It's now a very large wildlife management area spanning Rockbridge and down into Botetourt County. It's the headwaters of Cedar Creek, which runs underneath Natural Bridge. There's karst topography there, contributing to water quality and cave resources. It's very, very game rich, particularly a very robust population of grouse, which if you're grouse or quail hunter, you know, is getting scarcer by the day. There are open fields on the property which hold pollinators and provide neotropical and woodland bird habitat. And if you flip over, Nikki, please. Nope. Okay.
Why it's not advancing?
Okay. Well, I'll just keep going. This is kind of coming full circle 20, or well, not quite 20 years later, 15, 17 years later, because we now are in the process of trying to acquire collectively 7,000 acres that is literally within spitting distance of Short Hills Wildlife Management Area. It's Maze and Purgatory Mountains in Botetourt County. We have raised most of the money for it, certainly enough for us to proceed with the acquisition. I would anticipate a request next year to VLCF, and am hoping for that to be perceived favorably. But at the end of the day, that whole block of land will approach 12,000 acres spanning 2 counties and open year round for public outdoor recreation. The final property that I wanted to talk about is the Port Richmond Marsh outside the town of West Point. It's actually located within the boundaries of the town of West Point. It's 500-acre marsh. It's very pristine. And the property owner sold it to us at a $141,000 bargain sale. Yeah, maybe we got, yep. Okay. It's got 2.5 miles of riverfront on the Mattaponi. It's highly visible as you come over the Mattaponi River coming into and out of the town of West Point. You'll see it there, slightly upriver from the bridge itself, where it terminates into the York River. We received $260,000 in federal money from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the National Wetlands Conservation Act Fund. And we also received a $220,000 grant from VLCF, which obviously this property would not have happened without both those sources of funds. We are in the process of putting a conservation easement on the property. That's a requirement of VLCF grants, and it must be held by a public body. So we are working with DWR on this, anticipate that this property will be protected in perpetuity by the end of the year. And it is managed and open for public hunting, specifically waterfowl hunting. It's specifically, there's an ordinance in the town of West Point that specifically allows only waterfowl hunting on this marsh. But there are also other water-based activities, fishing, kayaking, canoeing, and it is contributing not only to public hunting, but to waterfowl habitat, flood resiliency, and water quality improvement. You can flip over, Nikki, if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. There you go. So that's a view of the marsh. You can see the bridge up in the right-hand corner. And we have 9 stationary blinds all around the marsh. We keep the pressure light because we are literally adjacent to the town of West Point and don't want to run afoul of any of our neighbors. And if you flip over the next slide, Nikki, it's For those of you who do hunt, it's a good canvasback spot up there on the Mattaponi. These are a couple young men who this was their first opportunity to harvest a canvasback, so they were, as you can see, pretty happy. The only other final thing I'll say is VLCF is fantastic to work with. For the staff there are top notch and really make it very, very, very easy to navigate the process of not only grant application, but implementation and record keeping and all of that stuff. So that's what I have for today.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
Sure.
Really, really fabulous projects, and hopefully we are over our technical difficulties, fingers crossed. So I'm sorry you had to go first and had to be the guinea pig for the technical difficulties. Okay, next we have, we're going to hear about 2 natural areas projects from Matt Wells, who is the director of the Department of Conservation and Recreation.
Great, thanks, Nick. So I think most of you know DCR helps support the VLCF permit for our natural heritage program. So just wanted to highlight, these are 2 grants that just closed in this past cycle. I should be talking about them at the VLCF meeting tomorrow. So you're getting a little bit of a preview. The first one is an addition to Crow's Nest Natural Area Preserve, which is, I think, our most visited preserve at about 25,000 people a year in Stafford County, about 3,400 acres. So a really significant property for the program. This recent addition is a 222 acre addition that protects key visual and ecological buffers along the main public access corridor for the preserve. Most of the property is forested wetlands and riparian areas along Accokeek Creek. There's some endangered species that are there, the federally threatened small world begonia. So a really, really great project. This was a $390,000 grant that we got to add on to Crow's Nest. So the other one that I'll highlight is a smaller acquisition. This is a 100-acre addition to our Deep Run Ponds Natural Area Preserve in Rockingham County. The preserve is about 900 acres and protects one of the largest remaining systems of Shenandoah Valley sinkhole that's in the Commonwealth. So this 100-acre addition that overlaps the core area of the Port Republic Civil War battlefield, supports 2 globally rare natural communities and 4 rare plant species. So the goal here is to improve the long-term resilience of one of our most outstanding conservation sites. So really excited about this one. Again, a smaller acquisition, no less important, about $450,000. There's no public access currently on the site, but I've been there. It's beautiful. And really, really thrilled to have this one added. And I also just want to say thank you to Jenny for recognizing the staff of the support VLCF. They do a really fantastic job managing this program.
Thank you so much, Matt. And if I might, I'm just going to add in a few things.
Yep.
One of which is that this Crow's Nest project has been decades in the making, right? The first state acquisition occurred late 2000s, early 2010s, and it's been building ever since then. And so this project that was recently closed adds onto all these tracts that are in red that it's taken years to acquire. This is a good investment of state dollars, right? To be expanding an existing public resource. And as Matt said, this is one that is visited quite a lot. It's in Northern Virginia. It has ecological importance and historic importance, and it's just like more important than you can possibly imagine the more you learn about it. So
yeah,
really
to
wonderful.
have this kind of public access to open space in Stafford County where there's so much development pressure is really tremendous. And this really is an example of a lot of groups and a lot of elected officials coming together to kind of build this thing over many years. I think starting in 2008, I think is when we first started the acquisitions there.
Thank you, Matt. And then Deep Runs too is another addition to an existing natural area preserve, and also has historic importance. So like you know, we think of these things as being a natural areas project or a open space project, but actually a lot of them are fit into multiple categories and are serving multiple needs. So these are both that the projects that Matt just discussed are just closed using money from recent grant rounds. And now Parker Agelasto from Capital Region Land Conservancy is going to talk about a project that was approved in just the last grant round.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. So this project is a little bit different than what you have already seen. It's very small acreage. It is within the battlefield of Seven Pines and of Fair Oaks. This was a project that was awarded $271,000 from VLCF just in November. And it is to protect roughly 25 acres that is in Henrico County and the eastern portion of Henrico County. What is remarkable about this is that most people thought that these battlefields had already been developed and that there was not any available land left to preserve them. Now, you're not going to get the full scope of a battlefield like we have done at Malvern Hill, but in this instance, you are still able to preserve unadulterated land that is in its same condition from the days of 1862. This just shows how, even though there is development, how Conserve Virginia and its cultural and historic preservation category recognizes the national significance of the battlefields. And I've given on the right-hand side here just a location so you can see it is approximate to Interstate 64. You actually see this property from Interstate 64, and it is quite close to the airport. So a number of additional benefits when you're in FlyPath. If you could go to the next slide for me. The property is actually located on Meadow Road, and as I mentioned, it was engaged in 2 days worth of fighting. The first day they call Seven Pines. The second day was the Battle of Fair Oaks on June 1st, 1862. And what you are seeing here is a map of the battlefield and the movements of the various troops during this. The property was the position of the Union Army, and they had just finished a day's fighting for Seven Pines. This was the second day, and the property is generally located on this map where you see the Higher House and the 7th Massachusetts and the 4th Massachusetts, Maine being part of Birney's troops. And what's remarkable about the firsthand accounts of this battle, and there were quite a lot of them, it truly talks, and the soldiers report how they had to march through wet, swampy land to then get into a forest, and they formed into their military units in battle position in the forest and marched out of the forest directly across the Richmond and York River Railroad tracks into battle and engaging the moment they left the forest. It's really remarkable, if you go to the next slide for me, Nikki, how truly this property looks exactly the way it did in 1862. It is the same railroad tracks, the same position. They are active rail lines today, but you can see the woods. It's a beautiful mixed wood forest. If you go to the next slide for me, Nikki. It has an incredible understory. You don't get this kind of running cedar just anywhere. And the fact that we are in Eastern Henrico in a highly developed area makes this particular property remarkable. And then you see on the right-hand side what is called Broadwater Creek. And this creek flows from the south side of the interstate onto this property, and then it continues a northward flow and empties into the Chickahominy River, and then goes to the James River. So it's an important watershed. And when we were doing our original analysis of this property, certainly it has a lot of benefit from conserving battlefield land that has not been altered in the past 160 years. But this particular area of the creek was showing up as a predicted habitat for swamp pink, which is a threatened and endangered plant species with a known population that is only about 1/4 of a mile downstream. If you could give me the next slide, Nikki. So part of the things that we also look at, and we like to call it collateral values, there were two professors from the University of Richmond, Todd Lookingbill and Peter Smallwood, who have produced a volume on how battlefield preservation has contributed to some of the world's best biodiversity. And it's a really remarkable book, and they're right here in Richmond. So I encourage you all to look at it. But for this particular property, much of it is within the floodplain. And it is an incredible kind of natural green infrastructure for filtering water as it gets into the Chickahominy River. And so we saw that as a major benefit. But additionally, part of the VLCF requirement is that this property will have public access. And we look to the Trust for Public Land for their Park Serve model, where they look at urbanized areas. And what I've shown on the right is what they have mapped as public access in the Highland Springs community of Henrico County. And truly, there is no real park anywhere in the proximity of this property. So the public access and the ability for the community to get outdoors will be tremendous. And this is an area of Henrico County under immense development pressure. We have seen in the Richmond region it being the fastest growing region in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So to be able to have the funds, to be able to preserve the battlefield, but also to make it publicly accessible and have the various natural resources conserved makes this investment from the Commonwealth quite remarkable. And we're very pleased to have this project selected. Those are my slides.
Thank you so much, Parker. Such a cool project. Really appreciate that. The next project that we're going to hear about is from John Eustace with the New River Land Trust. And John blew us all away by actually providing a video. And hopefully this is going to work. And then we will, it's a very short video, but it's really compelling. And then he will talk a little bit about what it actually took to make this happen after the video. And
Nikki,
Parker, since I can, do you want to talk
Let me
first?
introduce it before you start
Sure.
the video. Yeah. But did you want to finish to say something to Parker? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, all I was going to ask him to do was to give me a thumbs up if you could hear the audio, but now I'm going to ask you to do it once I start the video.
Okay. So the New River Land Trust is essentially a community service conservation organization that works with stakeholders in the New River region to conserve natural and cultural resources. And we've helped stakeholders conserve tens of thousands of acres, but most of them are conservation easements that the public can't access. And, you know, it's critical if you want the public, if you want residents of Virginia, you know, residents of our various communities to understand the importance of conservation and support conservation, to do some public access projects where someone can go out and step foot and enjoy the special place that has been conserved. So I'm going to go ahead, Nikki, if you'll start the video. This is one of these communities and one of these main stakeholders that we worked with, along with other partners, to conserve a special place in Giles County.
When I was young, all I wanted to do was get out of this dead place. Wasn't nothing to do. I figured out that I'd lived in paradise my whole life and didn't know it. I'm Ralph Robertson, and we're at Mill Creek Nature Park, a trailhead, and I was born a mile down the holler here on Cave Hill. Like this area here, what I really like to do, I mean, I love mountain biking, and I love paddling. I used to love the rock climb, and I still do, but I can't do it. I done got old, my fingers won't do it. And you can do all that right here. This area is perfect because it's got enough stuff where you learn your skills, but it's not so extreme that you're going to get hurt. And you can bring your whole family along. We got some really good recreation here. The project is preserving this to where it's not destroyed. The land trust has helped with the grants and stuff. They know how to get these conservation easements, and that's what protects the land. I think the land trust has really done a remarkable job for us. It's my vision coming to pass. I've had that vision for a long time, It looks like I might get to see most of it before I die.
So just to follow up on that, I don't want it to misrepresent things. These projects are always a team effort. And so Ralph and the community in Narrows and Giles County, absolutely critical. They established a park. They got some resources to build out some of that park infrastructure with a previous grant from the Virginia Outdoors Foundation's Preservation Trust Fund. And then there was opportunity to expand that park and expand some of that, particularly trail infrastructure, by adding a adjacent piece of private land. The town and Mr. Robertson, didn't really have the resources, time, other resources to apply for the grant funding, sort of go through that process. And it took a couple years. We weren't successful right away. And so the land trust played an important role, but just as part of a team of, dedicating our time to prepare the proposal, to get letters of support, which came from way beyond just the community in Narrows. People love the Mill Creek Park there in Narrows. And we had all sorts of people from West Virginia, from other parts of Virginia, write letters of support saying, yeah, really love to see this park expand, add additional trails, and protect this really critical area. The place is definitely a special place. There used to be the water source for the town of Narrows. The infrastructure for the impounding that water is still there. And that's a place where I would drink right out of the creek. There are karst resources, forest resources. It's adjacent to the National Forest, very close to the corridor for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. In terms of karst resources, actually has a cave on it that is a historic cave that people used to come to Narrows on the train from DC and Richmond, and they would go out and there was a dance hall built on top of the cave. And then if you were in the know, you could get down in the cave in the 20s and there was a speakeasy and you could get yourself some liquor, to further fuel your dancing and other activities, social activities up in the dance hall. So we were thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Ralph and work with the town, to work with Emily White, who does a fantastic job with the Virginia Outdoors Foundation and their grant programs, including the Preservation Trust Fund. And we've now, the team has added additional acres, additional trails to the park. It's definitely an important asset for the community, but clearly from all the letters of support that came, broadly from all over the place, it's also a draw for people outside of the community to come. And so very much an important economic driver for Narrows and for the county of Giles. Giles is very focused on trying to diversify its economic sector, and outdoor recreation and tourism, ecotourism is a big part of it. So thank you for your interest in this, and we're just thrilled to have been a small part of it and to support Ralph and the community.
Thank you so much, John. Fabulous, fabulous project. Really fun to hear about. And speaking of Emily White, with Virginia Outdoors Foundation, she's going to round out this portion where we're talking about projects by providing some examples of projects that have occurred in addition to the one that John just talked about as a result of the Preservation Trust Fund.
Thanks, Nikki. And how much would everyone pay for a ticket for a New River Land Trust benefit down in that cave speakeasy? I mean, I think that is just a huge opportunity there. It would be so cool. Well, I'm going to focus today on what VOF is doing a little differently with Preservation Trust Fund. You guys have heard about some incredible projects that have been funded through VLCF through acquisition of land and easements. And what I'm going to talk about today is actually a variation on that use of funding, which has been tapped into by localities. We're seeing a lot of localities in Southside, Southwest Virginia, using our grant funds to protect lands they already owned, dedicate them to open space under the Open Space Land Act, but then use those funds to make that publicly owned land usable, accessible, and more easily enjoyable by the folks who live and visit in these areas. So the projects I'm going to talk about are smaller acreage. They're usually in urban environments. But it's really taking hold and becoming a great funding source for these localities to enrich their communities. So if we could go to our first project is in Lynchburg. This is Perrymount Park, which is about a 20-acre park next to an elementary school. For those of you who went to Vault last month, you may have been lucky enough to cruise by this area, but the Parks and Rec Department of Lynchburg submitted an application that was just really, really rich with ideas of how to take this kind of open space that folks didn't even realize was available to be used by the public and make it into something that the community needed and really could put to use. So through a lot of public engagement, you can see this fun drawing plan for the park with all the sticky notes. They had a lot of community meetings to get input on how to improve the land and really make it a resource. You'll note before they get started on these trails, the one thing people were united in is to protect the sledding hill. This is the best sledding hill in all of Lynchburg, so that was kind of unanimous. Don't touch that sledding hill, but they have plans for walking trails, a picnic shelter, even a dog park, but that's through separate funding. But VOF was able to give $169,000 to protect 18 acres as permanently, perpetual open space. And then the city was also able to get an RTP grant to help really advance these trails and make them ADA accessible. So that's been an incredible project there that's still underway and transforming. Now, if we head west to my next project is over in Franklin County. And this came in from the town of Boone's Mill. The town owned some land behind the town hall that they, had plans to sell some of it to turn an income, potentially develop for economic reasons. And then they had this vision to protect a portion as a natural area or a park to honor Maurice Turner. And they were able to survey off 5 acres, which they permanently protected as open space. And they did 1.5 miles of an ADA trail with some signage. And the bench that I'm showing was actually donated by Pathfinders for Greenway, so a local nonprofit, also to honor Maurice Turner. So this is a really great, easy to get to community resource. Again, it's ADA accessible, and this grant was only $50,000. So they really took what they had and made the most of it and leveraged those grant funds with a lot of other donated services. Yes, that is a whole lot of kudzu. I think that's next on the list. So they're chipping away at it. And then the last project I wanted to mention is just outside of Roanoke over in Vinton. And this one isn't done yet, but I couldn't resist talking about it because I think it's a great one. This is the Vinton Town Park, which is sits at a really high elevation, has a beautiful overlook over the Roanoke Valley. But if you look across, there's an aerial image in the centerpiece, and that odd rectangle with a very dark, mucky end is what you're seeing on the left of this old swimming pool that had fallen out of service, out of use, and needed to be removed. So Vinton applied for a PTF grant. They got $300,000, and they were able to protect this 5-acre park. And they're using those funds to remove the swimming pool, remove the old pool house. They've done this regrading, they've got it revegetated, and then all of those funny looking tubes you're seeing at the top left, that's a future playground that's going to be installed this summer. So I wanted to go ahead and share those, even though it isn't all assembled. We can do a follow-up slideshow once it's done and everyone's enjoying it. But again, it's a way to take some protect the land permanently as green open space, but also create a new amenity for the community so it's a neat use of funding to enrich these outdoor recreational spaces, but also preserve the green nature of them. So thank you.
That's really awesome, Emily. Thank you so much. Okay, I am going to just jump in here and talk a little bit about the mechanics of these programs. Won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's important for everybody to understand that the advocacy that Virginia Forever does for these programs is spent well and spent according to a very well run machine and very well pursuant to a very thoughtful law, and by Matt Wells's agency, by DCR, so that you know that the money, it doesn't just result in these fabulous projects that we just heard about magically, but it's according to a process. So the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation is Virginia's main land conservation grant program. It's the biggest one and the broadest one. It provides matching grants. And I don't know if you were clued in and focused on this when you were hearing from all our speakers, but many of the speakers said to us that the VLCF money is what got their project across the finish line, what made it possible. But it certainly wasn't the only funding source. And VLCF can provide up to 50% of the cost of a project, or 100% in the case of state agencies. But much of the time, it's a lot less than 50%, that the people who are doing these projects that you just heard from are going out and applying for and finding funds from a lot of different sources, of which VLCF is perhaps the most important one, but not the only one. Land trusts, private land trusts that you just heard from, Capital Region Land Conservancy, New River Land Trust, Wildlife Foundation of Virginia are some of the main applicants, but also localities, local governments, county, cities, and towns, and state agencies and the natural areas projects that Matt Wells talked about is one example of that. There's a statutory formula that says that the money has to be divided evenly among these categories. But before it goes through these categories, 25% off the top goes to the Preservation Trust Fund. So that's the program that Emily was talking about that she runs. That's also the program that funded John's project. It's just important to understand that these programs are designed in a way to try to make sure that all these different needs are covered, right? Because we all look around us and we see farmland being lost and we see forest land being lost in Virginia. We know that those working lands are incredibly important to protect. We know that we are losing historic areas every day. The most ecologically important places like natural areas, we lose those if we don't protect them. Then of course, everybody wants open spaces and parks. And so the way this program is designed, all those needs are being met every time the foundation does a grant round. So for this coming fiscal year, the appropriation is $16 million. And it will, the grant round is going to start this week because, as Matt mentioned, the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation is meeting tomorrow to approve the latest grant manual and to initiate a grant round. The applications will be due in August. There will be an interagency task force. All the departments that have land conservation programs get together and rank their projects and talk about them together. And then those rankings are presented to the VLCF Board of Trustees, and that is who will approve the grants this fall. So that's the very basic part of what you need to know about VLCF. Matt, is there something that important that I missed that you feel like we ought to put in here?
No, I think you did a really good job.
Okay. And thanks again to Matt and his staff because they're the ones who do this. Matt, by virtue of his role as director of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, is secretary of the VLCF Board of Trustees, which means he's the one who makes it happen. I'm going to let Emily now talk about that 25% off the top that goes to the Preservation Trust Fund. She told you about some projects and she's just going to talk for a minute about the mechanics of that program.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. I hopefully won't get down into the weeds too much on the program details, but the Open Space Lands Preservation Trust Fund was established in 1997. It does require that for these grant projects that VOF or a locality do take an interest in a property. So that translates into acquisition, fee simple acquisition, easements, potentially trails, but everything has to be dedicated as open space under the Open Space Land Act. So you do always need that public body, just like we heard with VLCF requirements. With the 25% that VOF is very appreciative to get, we actually divide it up to be used in 3 different ways. If we could go to the next slide. So VOF, as the leading land trust in Virginia, we do take primarily hold private land easements protecting those most special places in the Commonwealth that are rich in natural resources. And we do that not just through our grant round where we spend about 60% of our funds on private land, but we also do it by defraying the cost of donating easements to VOF or to localities. Depending on the amount of funding we get every year, we set aside a portion for an income-based cost share program for landowners giving easements to VOF, and that's our easement assistance program. And a couple of years back, we started a program for locality assistance where there's a little more paperwork involved because VOF needs to have an agreement in place with a locality. But if a landowner is having a locality hold their easement, they can also be eligible based on their income level for some funding to defray those costs as well. The projects you heard me talk about earlier that were focused on public access are through our regular grant program. We're also getting ready to open a grant round later this month, so keep your eyes open for that. Similar to VLCF, we do have a rigorous review committee and review process, and then our board is who makes those final grant awards. The deed restrictions that you're seeing here on your screen are those that are for public access. The ones for private land are very restrictive, but for the public access properties, we require, obviously, they need to be open to the public. We want to take away any division rights, keep them one parcel, and we want to cap impervious surface because even though these projects are focused on getting the public out and using and enjoying spaces, we want to make sure we're staying true to our mission and protecting that green space. So we say 10% max, most are much less. And then we also restrict the type of buildings and structures that can be on a property to being those that enable the use of the property as a park and for passive recreation. So with that 25% that VOF is fortunate enough to receive through VLCF, those are the work that we're doing and the terms that you're seeing as a standard requirement for our projects. So.
Thank you, Emily.
Sure.
There are a few other smaller grant programs at the state level, and these are focused on particular special resources. And I'm actually just not going to start here because if I start, I'll talk for another 10 minutes. So if you are interested and curious about these other grant programs, that's something that we can certainly explore in the future. They all operate similar to the way the VLCF and PTF operate. But they focus on particular resources. And that's all I'm just going to say at this moment. So I can wrap up here. The last thing that you need to understand is none of these programs, with the exception perhaps of one, are receiving the level of funding that Virginia Forever has recommended. And I certainly recommend that you go on the Virginia Forever website and look at the 4-year funding plan. We are entering year 2 of that 4-year funding plan where we made very specific recommendations for all of these programs. And our advocacy is working towards these kinds of numbers, but we're not getting there yet. So we've recommended VLCF get 30 million a year. For this year, it will get 16 million, which, hey, we are happy about because it's a lot less than it got 10 years ago. Okay. So I don't want to make this too negative a point. I just want to make a point about the direction that we need to move in. The Battlefields Fund actually is getting funding that's consistent with what Virginia Forever has recommended. But the Farmlands and Forest Lands program is getting far less now. The Department of Forestry is in a sort of building process for that program. It used to be the part of it was administered by the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and it was recently moved to DOF. So perhaps in a couple of years, we will have a better chance of getting up to the kind of funding that is needed. The Black Indigenous People of Color program that the Department of Historic Resources is running. It's a fairly new program, but it's not getting the $5 million a year that we've recommended. It's only getting 1.5, and really that's actually only for 2 years. It's zero in FY26, but they're about to spend the FY25 allocation that was just increased a bit in this past General Assembly session. VOF has a fabulous program that we didn't have time to talk about, the Get Outdoors program, not getting funded. And then there's a really significant chunk of funding that we recommended over 4 years. And again, we're only in year 2 of this, but $550 million for state parks and other public lands, wildlife management areas, state forests, natural area preserves, and the trails that we all love to get in between these places on our bikes or walking. To be able to kind of funding that other states are spending on these resources, we really need a significant increase, and we have not gotten there yet. So Governor Youngkin will have one more chance to make a proposal in this regard in his outgoing budget, and then the next governor, whoever that may be, whoever she may be, will hopefully pick this up as a priority. We were hopeful when the General Assembly did approve $20 million for state parks maintenance backlog, which is something Matt's about to talk about. But the governor vetoed that as part of a package of things that he felt like needed to not be funded this year, but perhaps in future years. So I'm going to round this out with just a few reflections. The first one is conservation real estate is not for the faint of heart. I hope that you got that from what our colleagues talked about. They talked about the public benefits and why these things are important to protect, but they also talked about how complicated it is to get these deals done and how many different funding sources have to be pulled together. How support has to be built at the local and the state level, and sometimes we're bringing federal dollars to the table, which is a whole other very complicated process. All these due diligence costs that Jenny talked about at the beginning can really make these programs challenging to complete, and the grant programs have been really important for that. I hope you will take away the many different kinds of resources these projects are protecting. You know, I love what Parker had to say about how battlefields are actually really important for biodiversity. I didn't even really realize that. So it's just really amazing to think about you know, the historic resources that are co-located with an important plant habitat, co-located with some, you know, wonderful recreational resource, all the water quality benefits of these projects, everything that's being accomplished. And then the last thing I'll say is these projects are for all of us. What the wonderful thing is about land conservation, most of what we talked about today is publicly accessible. And if it's not something you can go walk around on, it's something you can drive past or walk past and enjoy. It's for all of us, and it's for our children and their children and their children. So that's why we all do this. And that is the end of this segment of our webinar.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for providing that strong foundation and all your fellow speakers. Next, we're honored to have Director Matt Wells of the Department of Conservation and Recreation join us. Director Wells will be speaking on a crucial aspect of land conservation, the ongoing maintenance of conserved lands. Director Wells, I will pull up your slides.
Great. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today. While you're doing that, I want to give a shout out. And I got a couple of folks from my staff that are tuning in. They do all the hard work, and I have the benefit of sort of being able to lead the team and to set the direction. But none of this happens without the folks on the team. So we can just go ahead and dig into it. So this is basically, okay, you bought the land. Now, how are you going to take care of it? So most people, I think, know DCR because of the state park system. We have 43 fabulous state parks, soon to be 44. this year. The program is funded by a mix of general and non-general funds. It is a little bit more GF than NGF at this point. About 340 full-time, 1,200 part-time employees, depending on the time of year. 8 million people, give or take, will come to visit one of our state parks this year. We can go to the next one. So many of you, because you're plugged into this, are also aware that we manage the Natural Area Preserve program. The distinction I make is that, we manage everything for the resource, but we manage state parks for people to enjoy recreationally. We manage the preserves because there's something important from a biodiversity standpoint on the property that we want to protect. Where it's appropriate, we provide the ability for the public to access it. So we have 67 preserves, over 60,000 acres are protected. We just dedicated 3,900 additional acres at Southside Savannah Natural Area Preserve, which is a part of the Falkland Farm property. These don't get as much visitation as the parks, but they are starting to pick up. It was about 200,000 in 2023, a little bit more last year. Kind of give you some contrast in how these are managed. I mentioned parks has about 340 full-time people. The preserve program has 2 to 3 full-time staff per region, and you can see the regions there. So they cover a lot more ground. Let me go to the next one. Just because we got a limited amount of time today, I'm going to dig in on state parks because I think because one, they have more physical infrastructure, and I think that's the thing that most people have been talking about. So state parks has a pretty broad portfolio, almost 80,000 acres, 500-mile short line, a number of museums and landmarks, and a lot of physical assets as well. So 2,800 what we call improvements, which is essentially something that we built, replacement value of about $1.2 billion, 1,400 buildings, a bunch of cabins here at amphitheaters, and about 700 miles of roads, trails, and boardwalks. So a lot of things that need taking care of. Go to the next one. So when we look at maintenance, there's kind of a continuum of how we look at things. So starting there on the left, you've got your routine repair and maintenance of stuff like groundskeeping, facility cleaning, HVAC, kind of the very basic blocking and tackling, the kind of stuff that you do in your home on a regular basis. Moving on from that, you've got ordinary maintenance, so fixture replacement, painting, siding, relatively minor projects. We cover these two categories out of our operating budget. So that's all general fund specific money that we use for those projects. Sometimes we dip into our non-general fund if we need to. When you start to move into bigger projects, you get into what we call maintenance reserve. And so maintenance reserve is a project that's more than $5,000. These are bigger projects. We get a specific appropriation for maintenance reserve every year. In the current budget, it varies between, I think we got $5.5 million in the first year and $4.2 million in the second year. That is up. I think it had been about $3 million. So we appreciate the bump that we've gotten there. Then you get into capital projects, which are very, very large projects. These typically get a specific appropriation from the legislature, either as a standalone project or part of a group of projects. We've gotten a significant amount of capital funding over the past couple of years. The way that this breaks down really in practice is that frequently we use the maintenance reserve funding to fix stuff that breaks. So we have a septic field fail, or we have a termite infestation somewhere that we got to fix. That tends to eat up the maintenance reserve dollars, so that we are reliant on these capital allocations for the larger maintenance projects. And so if none of those other categories pick something up and it doesn't get funded or done, it eventually becomes deferred maintenance, which I think is the thing that most people are familiar with based on the conversations that we've had. So you can go to the next slide. There was a study done a couple of years ago on maintenance. We in the Virginia State Park system are not alone. This is kind of an endemic problem to systems with large physical infrastructures. Underfunding is widespread and persistent. So if you looked at what an appropriate budget would be based on industry standards for the replacement value of the system, which is at $1.2 billion, it's somewhere between 2% and 4%. you would add on about $2,000, $2,100 per mile of trails. And so using that metric, you get to an annual maintenance budget of between 26 and $51 million. So the maintenance reserve that we get is $4 to $5 million. The typical annual need would be $25 to $50 million. And so you do have a delta there. And because of that, we have built up a deferred maintenance backlog over the past couple of years. So you can go to the next one. So all in, as it sits right now, we've got about $388 million in identified deferred maintenance need. About $119 million of that is funded, which is fantastic. We've done pretty well over the past couple of years. We had historic investments in the fiscal 2023 budget. We've picked up a little bit more along the way. And so right now we're sitting at about $269 million in unfunded deferred maintenance need. This is just a little bit of an example of a type of deferred maintenance. This is the lodge at Hungry Mother State Park. And so kind of, it's okay from afar, but you get a little bit closer and you can see some pretty significant issues there. This is one of the more visible examples. There's a lot of stuff that the public doesn't see. Underground storage tanks, which we got some funding for this year, culvert structural issues with bridges, dam safety. So a lot goes into this. So you can go to the next one. The good news is, as I mentioned, we have gotten quite a bit of funding over the past couple of years, and we've been putting it to good use. We've done a number of cabin renovations that have been award-winning that people really seem to enjoy. And if you haven't had a chance to check out one of our cabins, I would commend that to you. Over the past 3 years, we've committed about $150 million to capital and maintenance projects. And right now, I just got the report in for May. We've got about $129 million in capital and $8 million in maintenance reserve funding somewhere in the hopper. It's about 65 projects. So I picked a couple of examples here. Starting from the top left, those are the trestles at New River Trail, which we recently rebuilt, and we did a really good job rebuilding them because Helene didn't knock any of them off of their foundation. So that worked out well for us. We really dodged a bullet there with only needing some minor repairs there. It was about an $8.5 million project. The one in the middle is a before and after of the Chip Oaks River House. So you can see we repaired the siding. We did some lead abatement. We repaired the roof. That was about a $400,000 project that we did out of maintenance reserve funding. The top right is some shoreline stabilization work that we did at Westmoreland. This is actually a partnership with VDOT. And we've had a lot of success with that, where they need to do some mitigation work for their TMDL obligations. We happen to be a convenient place to do a lot of work on public land. And so we've done quite a bit of shoreline restoration work with them. Westmoreland has significant erosion issues. As a matter of fact, we are losing a number of the cabins there because the only way to get to them is eventually going to fall into the river. And so we had to kind of get ahead of that. Going down from that, the boat ramp project at York River, it was also a maintenance reserve for about $1.2 million. And then in the bottom left, the new visitor center that we just opened at Highbridge. It's not a maintenance project, but it is the first new construction that we've built in quite a while. It was about $3 million, combination of ARPA money, some general fund appropriation, and a bond that I believe was passed when Highbridge Trail opened up. So finally spending that money. So a lot of work going on, even though a lot of need remains in the system. Go to the next one. So money is kind of the thing that we focus on, but it's not just money. Staffing is an issue in a couple of regards. So one, when you're understaffed, some of those routine maintenance projects start to fall by the wayside, and then that starts to snowball as people retire. You lose some of that historic knowledge about what needs fixing when, how you fix stuff, what's the little peculiarity of your particular park. We also have traditionally been somewhat understaffed in our planning and recreation resources division, which is our division that manages our capital projects. They had 5 folks handling all 65 of those 100 million plus in projects, which leads to some delays. we have had challenges with the physical inventory in our systems, and that we didn't really have a great, robust, centralized system to manage and track our inventory. And so we had a pretty good idea of what the physical plant looks like, but certainly not as definitive as we would like for it to be. And then finally, the state process to do a capital project is very, very lengthy. You're looking at between 24 to 36 months once funding happens. That leads to longer runways. That leads to the public getting frustrated. It leads to higher costs. And so all of that sort of fits into additional non-financial challenges, I would say. So we can go to the next one. We are taking a number of steps to address all of those challenges. So first, we are trying to get a better handle on how we prioritize budget requests and how we prioritize maintenance. It has historically been sort of a subjective process. We are working towards getting towards a more robust system that allows people to better elevate things from the field level to central management, better guidelines on how we prioritize items to sort of capture what sort of has been happening, I think, inherently over the past couple of years. And then that, I think, helps us better prioritize the funding that we get, both in terms of capital and maintenance reserve and those operating dollars. Go to the next one. We've also taken a number of steps in-house, and so we have strengthened our resource management division and so section. So we've got a director of natural resources, of cultural resources, of physical resources, and of park planning. All of those work together to help better maintain our property, to help us make sure that we're telling the right stories that we need to tell and that we're telling them in the right way. We have spent some of the non-general fund money that we have generated over the past couple of years that's been in excess of operating costs to purchase additional equipment for maintenance, which came in really handy after Helene. We had a number of new Bobcats that were ready to go so that we could help clear New River Trail in particular and Hungry Mother. We have hired additional maintenance staff. We have created a new chief ranger maintenance position at two of our largest parks, Pocahontas and First Landing, to help manage those million people a year facilities. We have looked in the past at building a trade tech program. We do a lot of contract work for things like HVAC that we could potentially bring in-house. And so that's something that we'll continue to revisit. I mentioned retirements and sort of that loss of institutional knowledge. And so one of the things that we're driving towards is better capturing processes and documentation so that when those long-serving rangers retire, people know where things are and they know how we've done things in the past. And then last, I mentioned that we have been working on our inventory, and we've done that by using, again, some of the surplus operating funds that we had to purchase an asset management system. You can go to the next one. And so we have purchased a system from OpenGov called Cartograph that we are using to build a definitive asset inventory to track the condition assessment of all of our assets, to be able to do a better life cycle tracking, to get ahead of preventative and predictive maintenance, to create a better work order and system and work order flow up from the field level. It'll have GIS integration and mobile capability for our folks out in the field. So we're really excited about this. You can go to the next one. We started rolling this out in 2024. It's been really successful. As with everything, there's a learning curve on this, but the goal is to have every park in the system in here in some shape or form by the end of calendar 25. We know we're going to continue to work on this over the next couple of years to refine it and to really maximize the capabilities that it has. But compared to sort of the, work by spreadsheet and handwritten notes that we have had in the past, this is a dramatic improvement. And I think the team's done a really good job of trying to integrate this into our processes. So I think one last thing that I want to hit on the next slide. There's a lot of non-maintenance challenges that we look at when we look at sort of the management of publicly accessible conserved lands. Public expectation. The public doesn't differentiate between a park or a preserve or a local park or a state park, and that creates management challenges about compatible use. The public has expectations for park development and maintenance. We have a land bank park, Henry County Mayo River State Park, that the public has been patiently waiting to turn into a state park since 2007. We recently, I think it's 2007, we recently launched the master planning process for that, which is sort of how we try to manage and capture those public expectations, because we're building a facility for the public. There's resource management challenges, right? We want people to come visit our parks. We've had a record visitation in the past couple of years. That puts pressure on the resource that we're trying to protect. It creates visitor and resource protection challenges. We have traditionally had a difficult time recruiting and retaining law enforcement positions. We were not in the Valor State law enforcement retirement system. We got about 100 fully sworn law enforcement rangers. That changed this year with the passage of legislation. And I know Delegate Willett's on here. And I think Delegate Bloxham and some others. I think I saw somebody from Creed Deeds' office. Senator Deeds carried the bill for us. We can't be more appreciative for getting that through. That'll really help us recruit and retain folks. And it's the right thing to do for our law enforcement rangers. We've got challenges related to access and accessibility, right? People being able to access the parks, right? Can they afford to go to our parks? We do charge a use fee. There are fees for overnight. Can they physically access the park? We've done a lot of work with physical accessibility with a track chair, altering wheelchair pilot, an Enchroma colorblind adaptive viewfinder pilot. And then is there a park near them? Right? We know we have recreation deserts. We do our best to try to fill the need at the state level, but we know there's a tremendous amount of need out there. There's also management challenges related to the land itself. And I think I saw Brian Fuller, who heads our real property office, on the webinar, and he can tell you we have a lot of neighbors, particularly for our rail trail properties, and a lot of acres equals a lot of neighbors, and a lot of neighbors means just by statistics, you're going to get a couple that don't want to play nice with you. And so while 99% of our neighbors are fantastic, the 0.5% that cause a problem are always something that you got to watch out for. We also co-hold a number of easements, either through VLCF or some other mechanism. And so the ability to monitor and steward those with a limited staff can be an issue. And then I mentioned challenges with the state process with the number of folks that we have in our Planning, Recreation, Resources Division. We did get another 2 people for that division this past budget. So we're really grateful for that. That'll help us put the money on the ground better. And with that, I'm going to stop, and I'm happy to take any questions that folks want to drop in the chat.
Thank you so much, Director Wells, for those insightful remarks. And you can continue to drop your questions in the Q&A throughout the entire webinar, and we can read them towards the end or right when the speaker is finished.
And I apologize because I've got to head out, but I know, Carrie, you can grab some questions if folks have them, and I'll be happy to follow up with them.
Absolutely. Thank you
Great.
again.
Thanks. Always good to be with Virginia Forever, folks.
Next up, we're pleased to welcome Parker Agelasto, Executive Director of the Capital Region Land Conservancy, who will discuss the critical threats to land conservation and explore the opportunities that lie ahead. Go ahead, Parker.
Thank you, Carrie. And bear with me while I get my screen to share, and hopefully you all can see the PowerPoint.
We can see it.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I get the fun assignment of scaring everybody and making you feel like, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end, and why have we not done enough to date? And that's the purpose of trying to get funding to support land conservation. I will start off and just give you a little bit of background of Capital Region Land Conservancy and why I see it that way. But also, I want to start with a hypothesis. And I want you to think about this hypothesis. A lack of investment in conserving land is a lack of supporting Virginia industry. All right. The easiest way to start that test is to say Virginia's top 3 industries: agriculture, tourism, with about a quarter of all tourists saying they come to be outdoors, and third, forestry. That makes up a significant portion of Virginia's GDP. And we are failing those industries if we do not continue to invest in them. Capital Region Land Conservancy, I'm very proud, is the leading conservation organization serving the greater Richmond region. So we support our capital city, and we support out about an hour's drive time outside of that capital. We have helped to protect over 15,000 acres since we were founded 20 years ago. Some of our success stories funded with VLCF funding and other battlefield preservation funds, etc. I share Malvern Hill, Campbell's Bridge Mills at the falls of the Appomattox River. We also have projects on the Chickahominy River. The one in the top right received a $3 million USDA Farm Bill grant. And the bottom left corner, it's hard to see, but those are earthworks that have been preserved within a forest. United States, I'm going to bring us to the top and then bring us in. So at the United States, about 13% of the nation's land has been permanently conserved, whether that be federal lands, state lands, private lands protected by conservation easements, etc. And yet in Virginia, we are doing better than that. We are roughly 17% of our land area permanently protected. However, half of that is federal lands. When you start to break it down, you get to a place where you start to realize that local land ownership, private lands, are a critical solution to conserving land going forward in Virginia. In the Bay, the watershed portion of Virginia, we have conserved approximately 22% of our land within the Bay watershed area, which is a higher level than what we have funded and conserved outside of the Bay watershed, mostly flowing through Southside. So it's disproportionate. And one of the things that I think should be noted, however, is that the Chesapeake Bay program has a goal, which would get to 30% of the Bay watershed protected by 2030. And that means in Virginia, to meet the goals of the Bay watershed, we have to conserve an additional 1.2 million acres. It's an incredible number when you think about it. In the Richmond region, and that's where I focus my efforts, but I want to share with you the disparities that we see across the state, and that is in the Richmond region at large, we have only about 6% of the land permanently protected, and it varies with the city of Richmond, but then out to rural counties like Hanover and Goochland, etc. We do have great success, and we were really pleased to announce that there had been 1 million acres of land conserved thanks to the efforts of the Virginia Land Preservation Tax Credit. And in the 20 years that it has existed, we went from approximately 175,000 acres of private land conserved to now more than 1,275,000 acres permanently conserved. That growth of 1 million in 20 years is all attributable to the private land sector. We're very grateful for the preservation tax credits to make that happen. However, what we are seeing is that landowners can't just donate 60% of the value of their land to get it conserved. The land preservation tax credit will compensate 40%. So the resulting landowners who do not take advantage of that are needing grant monies to close the funding gap. And this is the reality of losing our land and losing our industry. Every 30 seconds, a football field worth of America's resources will disappear to roads, houses, pipelines, and other development. We will be on this webinar for close to 2 hours. Think about how much land will have converted in this time that we are together. And what you can see is that in the 23 years between 2001 and 2024, Virginia has lost 19% of its tree canopy. We are losing 26,000 acres of forest land annually being converted to some other use. You might have read the news last week that Georgia Pacific was closing its plant in Emporia. 550 people are now unemployed. Losing our forestry, losing our timber industry is a big impact. I point out my concern in my region, New Kent County. It has, since that same time period, seen a decrease of 23% of its tree canopy, and there is a major plant in West Point. If the timber basket surrounding West Point continues to disappear, so too will the plant and the associated jobs. I'm driving home my hypothesis. In 2021, the direct impact of Virginia agriculture and forestry industries was $55 billion and employed approximately 185,500 employees, with an additive effect of about 1.7 jobs for every one agricultural job elsewhere. That is huge. This is an incredible across Virginia map, thanks to VDEP, Virginia Economic Development Partnership. So we are seeing what could happen to our industries if we do not continue to support investing in timber and in agriculture. The loss of farmland. The American Farmland Trust has put out a lot of data called Farms Under Threat, and it looks at the conversion rate of our prime farmland, the best soils that we have in Virginia. And what you are seeing in this map is anything in red is where prime ag soils were converted to some other use, predominantly housing or low intensity development. This is the Richmond region. And you can see what has begun to happen in the Richmond region. And I'll drill down into one locality. But what you can see is that Virginia is now ranked in the top 10 in the whole country in terms of 50 states. What is happening to the absolute loss of acreage and on a percentile basis. And here is the result. The scorecard that American Farmland Trust has said is that our policies and our investment are not keeping pace with the development threats and the conversion threats. We have in Virginia an investment of 10 cents per capita on permanent conservation of farmland. That's on an annual basis, 10 cents per person. Imagine if we just went and begged for a dime from every Virginia citizen to conserve land. That's the amount that the Commonwealth is investing right now. It is very scary when you think about it, and supporting our top industry. Additionally, what is being converted is it's not going to a lot of other jobs, higher paying things. It is going to what they call low density residential development, where the development pattern is scattered, large lots, and a lot of fragmentation of the agricultural land base and of the habitat. And what's more is while Virginia lost during the time of this report 4% of its agricultural lands between 2001 and 2016, since then, we have lost 488,000 additional acres of farmland. Since 2016, we are losing roughly 100,000 acres of farmland every year. We are a net importer of our food source at this point. And we also lost 10% of actual farms, the businesses. We lost 10% of the businesses. These are what is at risk. Henrico County, again, back into the Richmond region, it has seen a devastating loss of its agricultural lands in 40 years. It is now where it is over 80% of its farm base has gone. And Henrico used to be a dairy capital of the entire state, and yet there's not a single dairy farm today. Perfectly fine. We're balancing growth, we're balancing development, the balancing jobs and workforce, and the need for housing with conservation. That is the objective. We have to be able to sustain ourselves. And again, I go back to, well, what are those agricultural businesses that are benefiting across the state from the renewable resource of our farms? The development vulnerability model, and we are very fortunate in Virginia to have an incredible Department of Conservation and Recreation, to have the Virginia Natural Heritage Data Explorer. And one of the models that they have, and this is accessible to the public and you can go look at it, but one of the models that they have is the threat of land being converted in a time period. And what you are seeing in those darkest orange is that this is looking at a 5-year horizon, and it's saying there is a 50% chance of that land being converted from its current use to another use within 5 years. That is that darkest orange. The gray, forget it. It's already developed. It's gone. And then you start to see the yellow and then the green. And so it becomes less probable. But as you get development in the orange, that line only creeps further and further out. That is the sprawl effect that we continue to see with the development patterns in Virginia. This is how that development vulnerability model looks in the state. You can see the hot spots of Hampton Roads, Northern Virginia, the Richmond Capital Region, but then also down in the Lynchburg area and the Blacksburg area and the Roanoke area, we are seeing hotspots. All the I-81 corridor, all the I-64 corridor, all the I-95 corridor. These are very evident on the development vulnerability model. Now, pay attention, and I will toggle between these screens, but you will see this is the development vulnerability model. This is the ecological core. It's an inverse. Oops. Where you have ecological core, you don't have the development potential, and you're getting these donut holes. Well, the problem is, as development continues to sprawl out, it is creating more and more fragmentation of the ecological core. And what we have seen over the last 20 years with the modeling that DCR has done is that there used to be a lot more red, there used to be a lot more orange, and a lot more yellow. And as development and as we carve up the landscape, we are fragmenting habitats. We are fragmenting the natural mobilities of plants and animals. And that is creating additional risk. And VDOT and the Department of Wildlife Resources and the state, and thanks to the General Assembly, put together this Wildlife Biodiversity Resilience Corridor. They have come up with places that we need to conserve land in order to, one, help with habitat migration, but two, and if you can see on these slides, the purple, that is where people are hitting wildlife on our roadways, and they're dying. The people are dying. The animals are dying. And we're doing significant damage to personal property. Every time there's an animal strike with a vehicle, it's costing that driver about $7,000 on average in the Commonwealth of Virginia to repair their vehicle. And the result is that we have fragmented our landscape and we've created conflict zones. And the Commonwealth has said, let's resolve those conflict zones. Put focus and attention on land conservation, and you can help save lives. Other threats. The other threats. A landowner who owns their land and it may be their greatest asset is being told, well, you can get 40% of it in a land preservation tax credit if you conserve your farm. The alternative is, I'm a solar developer. I'm going to offer you buckets and buckets of money that can't even compete. And by the way, you can't even get that appraised value for a land preservation tax credit based off of some prospective solar project. The solar grids, the solar energy nexus is really making Virginia's landscape a challenge for conservation, largely because of landowner expectations of value and the fact that, according to reports that I've seen, Virginia needs about 5 million acres of solar arrays in order to meet the Clean Energy Act. Okay, that's incredible. 5 million acres of solar. We don't even have 5 million acres of conserved land yet, right? How do we make sure that these things are put into balance? And thanks to the General Assembly, again, they put together this initiative, which is supported by Dominion, which is supported by Virginia Cooperative Extension, a number of other agencies. And this is to now show where the solar projects are being placed, how they are being permitted, to better understand statewide what it looks like. And you can see it's pretty massive across the Commonwealth of Virginia. How do land conservation compete with that if they don't have additional investments? How can our agricultural industry compete with that if they don't have investment? How can forestry compete with that? How can our wildlife, who don't understand the fact that we live in a commercial world, how does wildlife compete with this? So I share these as the real challenges that we have a bit of control over. You know, we permit, we do land use planning, we do zoning. Things that are out of our control that are also threats. We have to understand, and you heard Director Wells talking about how they're having to shore up and put in shoreline protections for some of the sea level rise and effects. Our eastern tidal waters are a real threat to our land. ADAPT Virginia is a great model that Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences has out there, and you can see what a sea level rise impact will be. Do you see the eastern shore of Virginia? That's where a lot of our farmland is, and it is threatened. Where is that farmland going to be in the future if we do not save it now? Not necessarily on the eastern shore because it could be underwater, but do we have farmland in reserve if we lose this to sea level rise? Where are we making the balance, and what are we doing thinking about 50 years from now? When we talk to a landowner about a conservation easement, we say, what is your 50-year plan? I'd like the Commonwealth of Virginia to think about its 50-year plan and to start making the investments, understanding where it wants to get and be in 50 years from now. That is where Conserve Virginia is, the state's roadmap for where it would like to do prioritize conservation. I think that is something that we need to consider, and it certainly is a scoring factor when it comes to the state's grant funding to determine where it would like to put investment. And we are seeing now incredible investments coming in from our federal government. I share with you the new Virginia Security Corridor, which means that federal dollars can match federal dollars in terms of conserving land within this footprint. And that is the investment that our Department of Defense is committed to. I grew up in Virginia Beach. I understand that Oceana Base was going to shut down and relocate because housing and development pressures were being put on to the base. And the city of Virginia Beach was put on notice, stop the development, we need a buffer. That was the reality of losing a lot of jobs. And now we have security corridors. It's fantastic to see in place. We know that the federal monies are going to be there. I will say U.S. Department of Agriculture, Farm Bill monies are still flowing. Battlefield protection, National Park Service monies are still flowing. These are big, important investments that we can make in Virginia, but we need the state monies to leverage them. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Carrie, for letting me kind of get everybody excited about why this is so important and the timeliness of it.
Thank you, Parker, so much for that very informative and terrifying presentation. We appreciate it. And remember, you can always drop your questions into the Q&A session. Next, we are delighted to have Delegate Willett and Delegate Bloxham join us. We'll begin with Delegate Willett, who will be introduced by Ken Wright, Policy Director at the Potomac Conservancy. Ken, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to begin by saying I don't have great slides like Parker, so you will have to look at my mug for a lot of this conversation. But we're lucky to have two incredibly knowledgeable and insightful legislators with us today. Delegate Willett is a Virginia native. He was first elected in 2019. He represents the 58th District, which is Western Henrico. He's a member of ACNR and Appropriations, and he's been instrumental to environmental protection and land conservation across the Commonwealth. Virginia Chamber of Commerce recognized him as Freshman Legislator of the Year in 2020. And he is on numerous boards and commissions, and that includes the Nature Foundation at Wintergreen. So an outdoor enthusiast, Delegate Willett spends a lot of his free time biking, running, skiing in the Commonwealth and throughout the country. So thank you for taking the time to join us, Delegate Willett.
No, it's great to be here. I can appreciate the introduction. Great to be with my colleague Rob Bloxham as well. I can jump in just with a couple of high-level comments. Sort of two themes that you've already heard. One is, quote, they're not making any more. We only have the land that we have. and hence the reason we've got to protect what's left. And that's certainly a priority for me. And I think that's a pretty shared priority across the Commonwealth. The second theme is what you just heard a ton from and great detail from my good friend Matt Wells, and that is taking care of our state parks. That's a real priority of mine and many others in the General Assembly. And the numbers that I think Nikki shared some, he shared a ton, including $269 million in deferred maintenance that's not funded right now. Huge need, huge priority. We made some progress, but we've got to take care of the park. So, I could jump into a couple of legislative initiatives that are trying to address those things. The one that probably got the most attention this session was Paul Krizek's bill. I always have to look at the numbers, HB 2059, the Virginia Great Outdoors Act. That was a restructuring of how we fund what we're doing here. $200 million annually from the recordation taxes to go towards land protection and preservation, some additional bond money for infrastructure. A lot of bipartisan support for that. Paul Milday, delegate, and then Bobby Orrak, another Republican delegate. They were co-sponsors with Delegate Krizek on that initiative. It's a big price tag, and I think what happened is I sit on appropriations, as Kent mentioned, and just didn't have the wherewithal to do this. But it wasn't for lack of interest, and I think this is something. This issue, the funding question, is something we'll get back to. I also was going to just quickly mention in terms of priorities, budget amendment that my good friend David Bulova carried in the House, trying to address some of that deferred maintenance that we heard about from Matt Wells. He had a budget amendment for, I think it was $20 million to go towards the parks, trying to scrape away at that need. Unfortunately, that got vetoed. But again, the need's not going away, as you heard, and it's more than maintenance, although maintenance is a big part of the park's needs. The argument I make, the state parks. I mean, I'm a state park advocate, so I'll argue it as someone who likes to enjoy the outdoors, and obviously there's an positive environmental impact there, all the recreation and just people accessing it and then better understanding the outdoors. But that access and that demand certainly goes beyond Virginia, but it's significant within Virginia. So these are economic development, business impact dollars we're looking at. So sometimes if the environmental pitch may not be resonating, I pitch the economic impact of our parks, of the recreation, of these amazing lands that are out there, which is why we need more of them. And you don't have to travel very far to see those. We are blessed with a great park system and great preserved lands out there that we can access for hiking or whatever. And it's an asset, and people will come from many miles away to do that. The demand is actually significantly increasing. I don't know. That's left over from COVID, when a lot of us discovered state parks we hadn't seen before because a lot of those were still open and we could get to those spaces. Pocahontas State Park is really not far from where I live. It's down in Chesterfield towards the bottom, but still, less than half an hour away. And that became one of my go-to places during COVID because I had no idea how expansive it is. And that's literally in my backyard. And there are many others across the state that just get more and more beautiful as you get to the mountains or to the coast. So I think there's a lot of interest in doing more there. And you pick your argument, make an environmental argument, make a recreation argument, make an economic argument. All of them point towards trying to do more there, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will highlight, and I don't have the bill number in front of me, but Delegate Willett was a big champion of Virginia tourism as well. I believe you had the recreation piece, I think more is what that speaks to more, but advocating for tourism in Virginia and folks visiting our parks and things like that. So fantastic to hear from Delegate Willett. And are there any other highlights that you want to touch on?
Well, I'll mention one thing because I'll tell you, there were some other bills. I won't go into all the details of all the bills that didn't make it through related other environmental initiatives, certainly things focused on solar. I have actually gotten bills related to solar energy through. I did have a tree canopy bill that the governor signed. So I take that as a badge of honor. It actually ended up with bipartisan support. In the interest of time, I won't give you the full story, but the short version of this is that a young man, a constituent, actually a 8-year-old third grader named Liam, was talking to his mom and said, "Mom, I am really concerned about trees." And she said, "Liam, what do you mean by that?" And says, "Well, we're losing too many trees." And Liam was kind of frustrated, and his mom said, "Well, you should write a letter. You should write a letter to your representative and tell her that you're concerned." So they thought about going the federal route, but it takes too long to make things happen there. So they went local. They went to me. I got this amazing, I probably got my drawer around or somewhere in my office, but anyway, handwritten letter with a picture of a tree on it. And Liam said that he wanted me to do something about protecting trees. Well, coincidentally, I was approached literally a couple of weeks later by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to carry a bill that essentially makes it easier for developers to meet their tree canopy preservation requirements when they're doing a development. Some, but not all localities have a fund that they can pay into to deal with that. And so the bill's essentially to help make that easier for more localities to enable that. So I called up Liam, talked to his mom and said, "Guess what, Liam, we've got a bill we can carry, but I need your help." And so this bill was coming before Kathy Tran's subcommittee, ACNR. And I said, "Liam, I need you to come down and talk about your bill." So, oh my gosh, we had a meet. I think we started at 7 a.m. on a school day, but Liam showed up with his parents. He had his little blue blazer on. He sat there for an hour and a half. He was the last presenter, or I was the last presenter. And then I had Liam come up and read his letter, talk about the bill. Very put together, much smoother than I was on the presentation. But the great part was when the other advocates, including Ken Wright, spoke to the bill, and there was building support. In fact, the advocate side, by the time they got to like number 3 or 4, they started referring to the bill as Liam's Law. And then eventually Kathy Tran picked up the same vernacular, and so it became Liam's Law. We also got the home builders to support it. So this thing was rolling, got it through the House. And then there, of course, is the Senate. Had to tell Liam the tough news. Well, you got to do this whole thing all over again. It's in the Senate, but similar outcome there. Liam came down. The bill was referred to as Liam's Law. A lot of great support, got it through there. Then had to give him the really tough news, which is, Liam, we got you through the General Assembly, but that's only part of the process. You still need the governor's signature to get to the finish line. And said, he's not signing a lot of environmentally friendly bills these days. But lo and behold, governor signed it. And I will say, if someone said, what was your legislative highlight for the 2025 session, maybe for all my sessions, it was getting to call Liam, actually called his mom, and got to share the news that his bill had been signed by the governor. His mom put me on speakerphone, and I said, "Hey, Liam, guess what? The governor signed your bill." He literally started screaming and jumping up and down. I could hear him jumping up and down at his house. So I wish all my constituents were that happy when I do something good. But anyway, so you'll see more on Liam's Law. That was a great story. And what I've learned now is a lot of my colleagues are going to be bringing 8 and 9-year-olds to carry their legislation for them in session. So watch out for a lot of third graders coming to the GA.
Liam is probably going to win Lobbyist of the Year. I don't know if that award exists. They haven't contacted me yet, so I assume that Liam is getting the prize. I guess to kind of zoom out a touch, what is your impression of the legislative landscape going forward? And kind of a two-parter. What challenges we face in terms of making this a priority for your colleagues? I mean, again, we have you and Delegate Bloxham on right now, which is wonderful, but how do we get other legislators to the knowledge level or just the familiarity that you all have with the outdoors in Virginia?
No, I appreciate that question. I'll certainly let Rob weigh in on that too. These are, I think, for the most part, bipartisanly supported issues. So that's good. I think it's like a lot of things, even when you have bipartisan support, you got to get it to the top of the pile, get the priority up there. And that's why I think everyone today we're all saying the same thing, which is that we can get more land and that we have, we've got to take care of. And that includes our state parks and other areas. So if people can pause for a second, just to look at what we're blessed to have, I think they get it. The problem is we're all so busy, and I spend a lot of time with healthcare policy, education policy. Those are transportation policy. I mean, those are big, important things. It's just the environmental stuff to me is existential, and if we don't get it right, we don't get a second chance. So I don't know. It's not so much that the sky is literally falling, and I don't want to be necessarily trying to scare people, but we need action, and we need money, and we need prioritization. So I think in a deliberative way, and maybe with a voice of reason, sharing the statistics like we've heard today, the numbers. Parker, really loved your presentation. I mean, pictures and numbers, the mapping, really brings it home in terms of what's happening. And that's not just our area, that's the whole state that's being impacted now. So I think we just have to keep telling the story, and I think more people will get on board. We do have, one way or the other, we have a change in administration, and there's just no way you can run for a statewide office in 2025 and not have environmental issues on your platform. I mean, it's just too much at stake because it impacts everything. It's not just the environment. Spent this morning touring some amazing farms in Hanover, doing regenerative agriculture, lowering the improving the soil quality and reducing what's going into the bay. There's an environmental argument for that, but there's also an economic argument. They are spending a lot less per acre than their colleagues up the road or down the road from them. So it's a more effective agriculture. So again, I like making environmental arguments, but when you can make economic arguments for what we're doing and the impacts, and certainly we need to keep Virginia the beautiful place it is, place that people want to come to, people want to live in. I think that's the argument that we all can make and hopefully be successful.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your insight there. I think that's a discussion that we've had in the land community is how do we get land champions? And I think one of the best ways to do that is to, take them out there. That's a better argument than I can make, that most of us can make, other than showing them, what we're preserving, right? What we're working to maintain and acquire more of, et cetera, right? So I really appreciate your insight on that one. I know that we are running a bit long, so I don't want to keep you too long, Delegate Willett, but one last question. So you highlighted Delegate Bulova's budget amendment. Could you dive a bit more into that? Like, what was I know that he introduced 50 million in the House, it became 20 million in conference. Was he the driving force behind that? Are there any lessons that the land community can take from that, in terms of advocating for budget amendments and legislation?
Well, David is certainly known, particularly on water quality issues. He's the go-to guy. So yes, having him carry any bill related to the environment is a good call. This one was back on the maintenance side, and he's certainly respected. He's been around here a while. And also sits on appropriations. So I think those are all good things. You don't have to have a patron, a amendment or bill patron who sits on approps, but it doesn't hurt. In fact, I'd say it's probably recommended when you can make that work out. There's just a lot of competing priorities out there. And he certainly, I mean, again, he did well. He got it through. Just unfortunately, the governor vetoed it, but it was absolutely a priority item. So I think that's one that I absolutely know will come back when we get into the biennial, the biennial process that will start literally now working on for 26 to 28. So yeah, you just got to keep it front and center. I think again, where you have bipartisan support, going back to the Great Outdoors Act that had bipartisan sponsors, patrons, and that's super important. And I think, as you look at these and other initiatives, yes, looking at that equation of trusted voices, but as much as you can, bipartisan voices.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very insightful. And I think, that is very helpful for us as a community moving forward in the work that we do. I know that you are very busy. I'm glad you took out time for your day to speak with us. I want to make sure that Carrie and Delegate Bloxham have an opportunity to have a discussion, but thank you so much, Delegate Willett. Really appreciate your insight. I know that folks in the call will as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Willett. Well, it's now my pleasure to introduce Delegate Robert Bloxham. Delegate Bloxham represents the 100th District in the Virginia House of Delegates, a role he has held since 2014. His district encompasses the beautiful Eastern Shore and parts of the city of Virginia Beach, which we have been talking about today. Areas he deeply understands and passionately advocates for. He's a lifelong resident of the Eastern Shore, and he brings a wealth of experience and a deep commitment to his constituents. A successful small business owner, he has valuable insight into the economic needs and challenges faced by Virginia's businesses and families. Throughout his tenure, Delegate Bloxham has been a strong voice for fiscal responsibility, agricultural interests, fisheries, and conservation. He serves on the Virginia House Appropriations Committee and the Commerce, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Subcommittee, and he's been an active and engaged member of the House Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources Committee and its Chesapeake Subcommittee. A longtime member of the Chesapeake Bay Commission, Delegate Bloxham brings his knowledge of the region to restoring the bay, on which so many of his constituents depend for their livelihoods. Delegate Bloxham is also known for his collaborative approach, working across the aisle to find practical solutions that benefit the entire Commonwealth. Welcome, Delegate Bloxham.
Thank you for having me today. I appreciate that. It was interesting to listen to Rodney. He spurred my memory. Seems like the session was, decades ago. We just ended. I guess one thing I would like to just bring up, I think one of the questions that y'all posed to me was like the key things that happened in conservation this year. I mean, realistically, the funding historically, where I've been a conferee for the last 4 years, has been strong. Stronger than it has in the past, I guess I should say. Not as strong as I know the community would like to have, but historically, we funded some things at a very high level. Like one of the reasons why the park system probably didn't get more money for maintenance is just how much maintenance can you do in 1 year. So you could give them 500, but if they can only spend 250, then why give them 500? So I think that was some of the drawback that we had. I mean, there are other, of course, as Delegate Willett said, there are a lot of other people out there asking for money. And that's probably why the Outdoors Act failed. You take $200 million. Yes, I agree that it's not a designated $200 million, but it is going to the general fund. Someone's going to lose $200 million. And I can assure you that every person that might lose money is going to call us during session. So, it's an interesting process that we deal with. My background with farmers, our BMP funding has been, we fully funded agriculture needs for the last 2 or 3 years. We're going out for like 3 more years fully funding. I mean, those are historic investments that Virginia just has never even come close to obtaining. So I mean, all that is very positive. I think Parker really scared the bejeebies out of us, but I will say the one thing I agree with Parker on is that when farmers or watermen cannot make money, when they become a break-even industry, you've got problems. Because the first thing a farmer will probably cut is his conservation practices. It's an expense that he doesn't want to, but if he's not profitable, he might have to. So I mean, there are certain things that I really hope in Virginia's the way I look at it, we need to make sure that all segments are profitable, and if they are profitable, the next generation will pick them up. Right now, I think farmers' average age is almost 60. Watermen's probably older than that. And if the next generation can't see that they can make a living doing it, then they're going to go find something else, which is a shame. We'll lose that segment of the population, the farms that people love, the woods land will eventually just be sucked up by another purpose, which is bad, and I don't want it to happen, but there's the nature of the beast on that one.
Thank you, Delegate Bloxham. Beyond traditional conservation easements, what other strategies or incentives do you believe Virginia should explore to support working farms and forests, ensuring that they remain economically viable while also providing conservation benefits?
Well, you've got, I look at most of our farmers around here are doing grain for poultry feed. And if it were not for the poultry industry, the grain would be worth far less. But it's very hard to have a society built on grain. I mean, it used to be an average size of a farm was 200 acres. It was vegetable production, potatoes, just we had a lot of tomatoes, a lot of strawberries, you name it. But 200 acres and you could probably feed 3 families on it. Now most of the farms are 3,000 acres and one family's doing it. And they're not exactly what I'd say making a great living at it. So I mean, I really hope that we focus on making them viable. Anything we can do to help a farmer make more money, then most farmers do not want to sell their land. Most farmers want to pass it on to the next generation. But sometimes it's not economically feasible to do that. The other bills I will say at the General Assembly, I mean, this year I would say was a fairly quiet year as far as the conservation bills. The one interesting bill that you might have touched on it earlier was the new state park that we failed to move on. Personally, I thought that was a pretty good purchase for the state, or would have been. But I think the backlog of maintenance and the associated costs going in the future, some of the senators really felt that if we can't fund and run what we have, why would we add anything to it? So it begs the question, and it's really, something that the conservation community really needs to look at is how much land is enough, and can you make it sustain itself, self-sustain it? Or are you always going to have to be subsidized to make it work? Matt and I have had more than one discussion about the fees that they charge for camping. My feeling is you need to be market driven, market price. If the campground next to you has velocity pricing, meaning you're higher in the summer than you're on the fall, state parks need to mirror that and not per se undercut the people that are investing their money in the campground. I'm not so sure his old computer can do it, but we've had that discussion more than once that, you got to figure out a way. You want them to be self-sustainable. You want them to be able to pay for their maintenance themselves. You don't always want to have to come to us in the General Assembly and ask for money, because on a tight year, it's not going to be there. And are you going to fund schools or a state park? I mean, schools are going to always win that argument. So that's why I think we need to just think holistically about the way to try to make all of this self-sustaining.
Thank you, Delegate Bloxham. In your view, what are the biggest challenges to consistently securing adequate funding for the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation? And what steps do you think the General Assembly could take to ensure its long-term stability?
$1 million question, or $2 question. No, on that's going to be just making sure. And I think the best way for the General Assembly and the members to understand the importance of agriculture, forestry, parkland is to visit them. The retreats that the Agriculture Committee does, the retreats that the Chesapeake Bay Commission, what we go on, they're invaluable. When you actually get out and you can see what's happening, see where the money's being spent, see the importance of saving those areas. That to me is the most important thing that legislators really we need to do more of.
Thank you, Delegate Bloxham. If anyone has questions for Delegates Willett or Delegate Bloxham, now would be a good time. Thank you guys so much for being part of our webinar today. We really appreciated it.
No, this is great. And I just going to echo real quickly what Rob just said, getting out there. There's no substitute for getting out there. I was fortunate. I chaired this Rural Health Committee this past year, and Rob was one of our hosts on the Eastern Shore. And oh my gosh, it was an absolute, I will say it was a beautiful time to be there. It's probably always a beautiful time to be there. But if you have any question about how important it is to take care of the Bay, just get out there. It is just an unbelievably beautiful place. And we are going to have he mentioned our Ag Committee retreat. We're going to head that way again. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to the Eastern Shore.
Looking forward to hosting again.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you both so much. We really appreciate it. If we don't get to your questions today, you can drop them in the Q&A, and I'll be happy to follow up with the delegates after this webinar. We're moving on to our next segment, our last segment. I know this has been a long webinar. We just have so much information and so many great speakers with us today. We're going to be transitioning to Securing Virginia's Land Conservation Legacy, and we're going to be featuring Ken Wright and Alan Rossum if he is able to join us. I know he was caught in another meeting just a few minutes ago.
I think Alan may still be caught up. I sent him a text, but we'll see if he was able to join us. I'm going to be really short because I know we're a little bit over time, but as far as next steps for the future, one of them is, and I think both delegates mentioned this, is how important it is to get folks out there. Field trips, programs, things like that, right, are great. And if you have a relationship with your local delegate, I know they appreciate being in the woods and not behind a computer all day. So they welcome that. They love that. And any opportunity to, again, articulate what we're fighting for in a way that I'm sure we would fail to do, right, is so important. As far as legislative initiatives, I know this has been a big topic of conversation that we've had in the past 20 minutes, but yeah, continuing to advocate for a sustainable funding mechanism. I think one of the things that is really important is intentionality. So to Parker's, where are we at in 50 years? That is true for conservation. That is true for everything, right? In terms of the work that we do, because we're not trying to make it sustainable for the next 10, trying to make it sustainable for the next 50. And I think part of that is intentional planning. So as far as sustainable funding mechanisms, still advocating for that, still doing a lot of work to introduce that to legislators. In addition, if there's anything that any of us can do, please let us know, reach out to us. I know that we're all more than happy to help or happy to connect you with folks that can. And then, yeah, again, state and local land conservation efforts are so important, be it localities, be it in the Commonwealth. I know that having a lot of groups in different interest areas on the same issue is powerful. So we really appreciate that.